The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, but nobody made a sound. 300 of New York's elite froze their eyes, darting between the man standing at the podium and the woman standing in the doorway. Preston Martha, the billionaire tech mogul, had spent the entire evening parading his 20-something mistress around the gala, laughing as he introduced her as his future. He thought his wife was at home crying over a tub of ice cream. He was wrong. When the double doors swung open, Isabel Martha didn't walk in to make a scene. She walked in to sign the checks, and the 4 words she whispered into the microphone didn't just end a marriage, they bankrupted a billionaire. This is the story of how the discarded wife became the new boss. The penthouse at 432 Park Avenue was silent save for the hum of the central air conditioning and the rhythmic tapping of Preston Martha's Italian leather shoes against the floor. He stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror adjusting the cuffs of his Brioni suit. He looked every inch the master of the universe, tall, broad-shouldered with a jawline that had graced the cover of Forbes 3 times in the last decade. But if you looked closer, you could see the cracks, the slight tremor in his hands, the way his eyes darted to his phone every 30 seconds. Martha Dynamics. His legacy was bleeding money. The board was restless. The stock was tanking. Tonight was the annual gala, but it wasn't a celebration. It was a rescue mission. He needed to secure the signature of the mysterious representative from the Obsidian Group, a shadow investment firm that had offered a $500 million lifeline. Preston. The soft voice came from the doorway. Preston didn't turn around. He watched his wife Isabel in the reflection of the mirror. She was wearing a simple beige cardigan and jeans, her brown hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked plain, safe, boring. "I thought I told you not to wait up," Preston said, finally turning to face her. His tone was dismissive, like he was speaking to a housekeeper rather than the woman he had been married to for 6 years. "I just wanted to wish you luck tonight," Isabel said, stepping into the room. She held out a small velvet box. "It's your anniversary with the company. I got you these cufflinks." Preston scoffed. He didn't even reach for the box. "Isabel, look at you. You're wearing sweatpants. I'm about to go close the biggest deal of my life at the Pierre Hotel. I need to be in the zone. I don't need domestic clutter." Isabel lowered her hand. Her face remained impassive, though her eyes hardened slightly. "Domestic clutter. Is that what I am?" "You know what I mean." Preston sighed, checking his Rolex. "You're a great homemaker, Belle. You keep the staff in line. But tonight is about power. It's about optics. And frankly, bringing you along, it sends the wrong message. The market needs to see vitality, energy." "And Hannah brings that energy?" Isabel asked quietly. Preston froze. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Hannah LaRue, your new executive assistant. The one you bought the Cartier bracelet for last week. The one who posted a photo from the passenger seat of your Aston Martin yesterday." Isabel's voice didn't rise. It was terrifyingly calm. Preston laughed a harsh barking sound. He walked over and patted Isabel on the cheek, patronizing her. "Don't be jealous, Belle. It's beneath you. Hannah is necessary for the image. She handles the press. She handles the clients. You handle the house. Stay in your lane, and you'll continue to live in this penthouse. Push me, and you'll be back pouring coffee in that diner where I found you." That was the narrative Preston loved. The savior. He had met Isabel 6 years ago, when she was working a double shift at a cafe in Brooklyn. He swept her off her feet, paid her debts, and moved her into his world. He assumed she was destitute. He never asked about her family. He never asked why a girl with a degree in economics from Wharton was working as a waitress. He just assumed she was a charity case. "Enjoy the gala, Preston," Isabel said, turning around and walking toward the door. "Make sure you sign that deal." "I always win, Isabel. Remember that." Preston grabbed his jacket and stormed out. He didn't see the smile that crept onto Isabel's face the moment the elevator doors hissed shut. She waited 3 minutes. Then she walked to the vintage telephone on the mahogany desk, the one Preston kept for decoration, and dialed a number. "It's me," she said, her voice shifting from the meek housewife to something sharp and commanding. "He's leaving now. Is everything in place?" A male voice on the other end, deep and respectful, answered. "Yes, Mrs. Martha. The board is assembled. The paperwork is ready. The Obsidian Group is prepared to reveal its primary stakeholder." "Good," Isabel said. She walked into her dressing room. She pushed aside the beige cardigans and the modest dresses Preston liked her to wear. She reached into the back of the closet, pressing a hidden panel. A false wall clicked open. Inside hung a gown of blood-red silk, a custom creation from Versace that cost more than a mid-sized sedan. Beside it sat a jewelry case containing the Vanderbilt Laurent emeralds, her grandmother's legacy. "Tell the driver to bring the rolls," Isabel said into the phone. "Not the one Preston uses. Bring my Phantom." "Of course. And Mrs. Martha." "What name should we put on the security list?" Isabel pulled the red dress from the hanger. "Don't put me on the guest list, Eve. Put me on the program, under owner." The Pierre Hotel was ablaze with light. A sea of paparazzi lined the entrance, their cameras flashing like strobe lights as the limousines deposited New York's upper crust onto the red carpet. A sleek black Maybach pulled up to the curb. The valet rushed to open the door. Preston Martha stepped out, waving to the crowd. He looked confident, radiant even. A moment later, a pair of long, tanned legs emerged, followed by Hannah LaRue. Hannah was stunning in the way a billboard is stunning, impossible to ignore. She wore a silver sequined dress that was cut dangerously low, clinging to her body like second skin. She was 24, loud and hungrier than a wolf in winter. "Preston, look over here," a photographer shouted. Preston wrapped his arm around Hannah's waist, pulling her close. "Mr. Martha." "Where is your wife tonight?" a reporter from the Post yelled out. Preston didn't miss a beat. He flashed his $1,000,000 smile. "Isabel is feeling a bit under the weather, but she sends her regards. Luckily, my brilliant executive assistant, Ms. LaRue, stepped up to help manage the evening." Hannah giggled, tossing her blonde hair back. "Preston relies on me for everything," she purred, leaning into the microphone a bit too eagerly. "Someone has to keep this company young, right?" Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere was tense. The board members of Martha Dynamics were huddled in corners, sipping scotch and whispering. They knew the numbers. They knew the company was days away from insolvency. Preston had spent millions on R&D projects that were really just ego trips, private jets, vanity real estate projects, and parties like this one. "He's parading her around like a show pony," muttered Harrison Thorpe, the company's CFO. Harrison was an old-school finance man, grey-haired and serious. He had been trying to warn Preston for months. "Let him have his fun," replied Eve Pendleton, the chairman of the board. Eve was a heavy-set man with a poker face that gave nothing away. He swirled the ice in his glass. "The Obsidian Group representative is coming tonight. Once the papers are signed, the restructuring begins." "Do we know who the investor is yet?" Harrison asked nervously. "I've dug through every shell company. Obsidian is a ghost. who has $500 million in liquid cash to dump into a sinking ship. Eve smiled, a small, tight expression. You'll find out soon enough, Harrison. Just make sure the microphone is working. Across the room, Preston was holding court. He had Hannah on his arm, introducing her to senators and hedge fund managers. This is Hannah, Preston bragged to a competitor. She's the future of our marketing department. Hannah beamed. I'm thinking of rebranding the logo. Blue is so... Yesterday. I want pink. Hot pink. The competitor choked on his drink. Preston laughed as if she had told a brilliant joke. Isn't she fire? Anyway, tonight is a big night. We're securing a massive capital injection. Martha Dynamics is going global. Preston? A low voice interrupted. It was Harrison, the CFO. He looked pale. Not now, Harrison. I'm networking, Preston snapped. Preston, you need to check the guest list updates. Security just radioed. There's a situation at the front entrance. What situation? Did the press get too rowdy? No, Harrison whispered. It's a vehicle, an unauthorized arrival. They tried to wave it off, but the passenger overrode the security detail. Preston rolled his eyes. So some D-list celebrity is crashing the party. Throw them out. I don't want any distractions before the Obsidian rep gets here. That's the thing, Preston, Harrison said, wiping sweat from his forehead. The car. It has diplomatic plates, and the security chief said the passenger claims to own the venue. Preston frowned. Own the Pierre. Don't be stupid. The Taj Group owns the Pierre. Not the Hotel Preston. The event. She claims she paid for the gala. Preston's arrogance wavered for a split second. He paid for the gala. Or rather, the company credit card paid for the gala. Handle it, Harrison. I have to make my speech. He turned back to Hannah, who was busy taking a selfie with a senator who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Come on, babe. It's show time. Let's go to the head table. As they walked through the crowd, the murmurs started. At first, it was just a ripple. Then heads started turning toward the main doors. The music, a live jazz band, faltered slightly as the musicians got distracted. Preston reached the podium. He tapped the microphone. Thump, thump. Ladies and gentlemen, he boomed, his voice echoing through the gold-leafed ballroom. Thank you for coming. Tonight marks a new era for Martha Dynamics. An era of innovation, of boldness. He looked down at Hannah, who was reapplying lip gloss at the front table. And of beauty. A few polite claps. Most people were looking at their phones or whispering. I know there have been rumors, Preston continued, his voice rising. Rumors of debt, rumors of failure. But I stand here to tell you that the Martha name is stronger than ever. Tonight we welcome a strategic partner who believes in my vision. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the back of the room slammed open with a sound like a gunshot. The room went dead silent. The silhouette in the doorway was striking. Backlit by the flashing cameras from the hallway, the figure appeared to be floating. She stepped forward out of the shadows and into the light of the crystal chandeliers. A collective gasp ripped through the room. It was Isabel. But it wasn't the Isabel anyone knew. Gone was the messy bun. Her hair was blown out in sleek Hollywood waves that cascaded over one shoulder. Gone were the sweatpants and the beige cardigan. She was wearing a blood-red silk gown that fit her like armor, with a slit that ran up to her thigh and a neckline that plunged daringly low. Around her neck sat a necklace that made the women in the room stop breathing emeralds, the size of quail eggs, surrounded by diamonds. It was the kind of jewelry you didn't buy at a store. It was the kind you inherited from royalty. She didn't look like a housewife. She looked like a queen coming to an execution. Isabel didn't stop at the entrance. She began to walk down the center aisle. Her stride was long and purposeful. Her face was a mask of cold, terrifying beauty. Preston stood frozen at the podium. His mouth hung open. For a moment, his brain couldn't process what he was seeing. Isabel. Here looking like that security. Preston barked into the microphone, his voice cracking. Security escort this woman out. 2 large security guards in black suits stepped forward from the sides of the room. They moved to intercept Isabel. Isabel didn't even slow down. She simply raised one hand, holding up a small black card. The head of security, a man named Miller, who had worked for Preston for years, squinted at the card. His eyes went wide. He immediately signaled his men to stand down. He bowed his head slightly as Isabel walked past him. "What are you doing?" Preston screamed. "Miller, I pay your salary. Get her out of here." Miller looked up at the podium, his face grim. "Actually, sir, you don't. Not anymore." The crowd erupted into whispers. Did the security guard just talk back to Preston? Martha Isabel reached the front of the room. She stopped directly in front of the table where Hannah sat. Hannah looked up her fork halfway to her mouth. She looked Isabel up and down, a sneer forming on her lips. "Well, well, if it isn't the maid. Did you get lost on the way to the laundry room? Nice dress, by the way. Is it a rental?" The people at the nearby tables held their breath. Isabel looked down at Hannah. She didn't look angry. She looked bored. "Get up," Isabel said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "Excuse me," Hannah laughed, looking around for support. "Preston, tell your wife to leave." "You're sitting in my seat," Isabel stated. "Your seat," Hannah scoffed. "Honey, look at the place card. It says Ms. LaRue. Preston had it changed this afternoon." Isabel smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She reached into her clutch a limited edition Hermes Kelly and pulled out a folded document. She tossed it onto the table. It landed right in Hannah's plate of seared scallops. "And I had the ownership of the building engaged regarding the seating chart," Isabel said. "You're sitting in the seat reserved for the majority shareholder." Preston had come down from the podium now. He stormed over, his face red with rage. He grabbed Isabel's arm. "What the hell is this charade? Where did you get that dress? Did you steal my credit card? Go home, Isabel. You're embarrassing yourself." Isabel looked at his hand on her arm. Then she looked into his eyes. "Take your hand off me, Preston, or you will lose the hand." There was something in her voice, a steeliness he had never heard before, that made him recoil. He let go. "You want to talk about embarrassment?" Isabel asked, her voice projecting to the silent room. "Embarrassment is missing your quarterly earnings by 40%. Embarrassment is looting the employee pension fund to pay for a private jet lease. Embarrassment, Preston, is bringing your mistress to a company gala when you haven't paid the catering bill in 3 months. The room gasped. "Liar!" Preston shouted. "I am the CEO of this company. I built this." "You inherited it," Isabel corrected him, "and then you ran it into the ground. You've been waiting for the Obsidian Group to save you, to inject $500 million. Yes, Preston puffed out his chest. "And when they get here, they'll have you thrown out. They believe in me." Isabel laughed. It was a dark, melodic sound. She turned her back on him and walked up the stairs to the podium. She stood where he had stood moments ago. She adjusted the microphone. "Eve," she said, looking at the chairman of the board. "Is everyone present?" Eve Pendleton stood up slowly. He buttoned his jacket. "Yes, ma'am. The full board is present." "Good." Isabel looked out at the sea of stunned faces. She locked eyes with Preston. "There is no representative coming, Preston," she said. "The Obsidian Group is here. I am the Obsidian Group." For 10 seconds, the only sound in the ballroom was the hum of the projector cooling fan. Then Preston Martha started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the desperate, manic cackle of a man whose reality was cracking and who was frantically trying to glue it back together with denial. "You," Preston wheezed, wiping a tear from his eye. He pointed a shaking finger at Isabel. "You are the Obsidian Group, Isabel, please. This is pathetic. You're a waitress. I found you scrubbing tables at Joe's Diner in Brooklyn. You didn't even have a winter coat when I met you. I bought you your first pair of decent shoes." He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms wide. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize. My wife is clearly having a mental breakdown. The stress of being a CEO's wife, it's not for everyone. She's delusional." He looked at the security team. "Miller, why are you just standing there? Grab her. She's mentally unstable." Miller didn't move. He crossed his arms over his chest, his eyes fixed on Preston. "I take my orders from the owner of the building, Mr. Martha, and according to the deed transfer that went through at 4:00 p.m. today, the Pierre Hotel's event spaces are currently under a private hold by the Sinclair Family Trust." "Sinclair?" Preston frowned. "What does the Sinclair family have to do with this? That's old money. That's oil and steel money." Isabel leaned into the microphone. Her voice was soft, silken, and deadly. "You never did ask about my maiden name, did you, Preston? On our marriage license, you were too busy texting your broker to look at the paperwork. You just saw Isabel S. and assumed it was Smith or something equally forgettable." She took a step closer to the edge of the stage, looking down at him. "My name is Isabel Sinclair. My grandfather was Archibald Sinclair." A murmur of recognition rippled through the older members of the crowd. Archibald Sinclair was a legend, a ruthless industrialist who had built an empire in the 1970s. "No," Preston stammered. "No, that's impossible. If you were a Sinclair, why were you working in a diner? Why were you living in a studio apartment with a leaky roof?" "Because my grandfather was a hard man," Isabel said, her eyes distant for a moment. "He believed that inheriting wealth without understanding labor was a curse. When I turned 21, he cut me off, completely. He told me I had to survive on my own for 5 years. No trust fund, no contacts, no help. He wanted me to learn the value of $1. She looked at Preston with pity. "I was 6 months away from finishing my exile when I met you. I thought you were charming. I thought you were a visionary. I didn't tell you who I was, because I wanted to be loved for me, not for the Sinclair billions. I thought I had found my Prince Charming." Isabel's expression hardened. "But you weren't a Prince Preston. You were a leech. You didn't save me. You just wanted a trophy you could polish when you felt small. And the moment things got tough, the moment your company started failing, you blamed me. You sought comfort in cheaper company." She gestured to Hannah, who was now standing up, looking furious and confused. "So," Isabel continued, "when my grandfather passed away last year, I inherited everything. The trust, the assets, and the investment arm known as the Obsidian Group." You have the money?" Preston asked, his voice trembling. The arrogance was evaporating, replaced by a dawn of horrifying realization. "Belle baby, wait. If you have the money, we can fix this. We can save the company. We're partners, remember, husband and wife?" Isabel signaled to Eve Pendleton. "Eve, show them." Eve nodded and pressed a button on a remote. The massive screen behind the stage, which had been displaying the Martha Dynamics logo, flickered and changed. It displayed a bank transfer receipt. Amount $525,000. Recipient, Martha Dynamics Debt Consolidation Fund. Sender, Obsidian Group, Isabel Sinclair. I already saved the company, Preston, Isabel said coldly. I bought the debt, all of it. The bank loans you defaulted on, I bought them. The bonds, I bought them. As of this morning, I am not just your investor. I am your primary creditor. I own your debt. And in the corporate world, the creditor owns the debtor. Preston fell to his knees. It was a theatrical drop, but the shock was real. You bought the debt. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to see who you really were, Isabel said. I needed to see if you would fight for this company, or if you would use the last of its funds to throw a party for your mistress. She pointed to the screen again. The image changed. It was now a series of credit card statements. Hannah LaRue. Isabel read the name on the screen. Position executive assistant. Salary $45,000. Corporate card expenses over the last 3 months. $340,000. The crowd gasped. The numbers were projected in high definition. Cartier bracelet, $12,000. First-class flights to Monaco, $24,000. Suite at the Ritz, $15,000. Porsche lease, down payment, $25,000. You were looting the company, Isabel said, her voice rising. While your employees were being laid off, while the stock was crashing, you were buying jewelry for her. Hannah LaRue shrieked. It was a high-pitched, glass-shattering sound. She grabbed a champagne glass and hurled it at the screen as if she could break the evidence. That's fake, she screamed, her face twisting into a mask of ugly rage. He gave me those things. He loves me. You're just a jealous, frumpy housewife. Preston, tell her. Tell her I'm the one you want. Hannah ran to Preston, grabbing his lapels, trying to pull him up from the floor. Preston, do something. She's humiliating us. Preston looked at Hannah. For the first time, he didn't see a young, exciting muse. He saw a liability. He saw the anchor that was dragging him to the bottom of the ocean. He shoved her away, hard. Hannah stumbled back in her heels and fell onto the red carpet. Preston! Shut up, you idiot! Preston hissed. He scrambled to his feet, turning his back on Hannah, looking up at Isabel with pleading eyes. Belle, listen. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. She means nothing to me. I was stressed. The company. The pressure. I wasn't thinking straight. But you're my wife. We can move past this. We have $500 million now. We can rule New York. Isabel watched him beg. She felt nothing. The love she had once held for him had burned to ash a long time ago. Eve, Isabel said, ignoring her husband. Please initiate Protocol 7. Eve Pendleton stepped forward to the microphone. He looked somber but satisfied. Protocol 7 is an emergency provision in the Martha Dynamics bylaws. It allows for the immediate removal of a CEO in the event of gross misconduct or financial malfeasance if the motion is supported by the majority shareholder. Majority shareholder. Preston laughed nervously. I still own 51% of the stock. You can't vote me out. I am the majority shareholder. Eve shook his head. Not anymore, Preston. Read the loan agreements you signed with the banks 5 years ago. If the company's debt-to-equity ratio crossed a certain threshold, the voting rights of the CEO's shares are suspended and transferred to the primary creditor until the debt is resolved. Preston's face went white. He remembered the clause. He had signed it because he was arrogant, thinking he would never be in debt. Isabel owns the debt, Eve continued, which means Isabel holds your voting rights. She controls 85% of the voting power in this room. Isabel looked at the board of directors, who were sitting at the front tables. I call for a vote, Isabel said clearly. Motion to remove Preston Martha as CIO of Martha Dynamics, effective immediately, and to strip him of all executive privileges, company assets, and security clearance. Seconded, said Harrison Thorpe, the CFO, standing up faster than he had moved in years. All in favor? Isabel asked. Every single hand at the board table went up. Even Preston's golfing buddy, a man named Jim, who owed Preston money, raised his hand. Rats fleeing a sinking ship. The motion carries, Isabel said. She looked down at Preston. You're fought. Preston stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. The silence was absolute. Then from the back of the room someone started clapping. Then another person. Then another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom. The employees he had terrorized, the investors he had lied to, the competitors he had mocked, erupted in applause. They weren't clapping for Isabel's wealth. They were clapping for justice. This is illegal, Preston screamed over the applause. I'll sue you. I'll sue all of you. You can't do this to me. I am Martha Dynamics, Isabel signaled to Miller. Mr. Miller, there is a trespasser on the stage. Please remove him, and ensure he does not leave with any company property. That includes the phone in his pocket and the watch on his wrist. The company paid for those. Miller and 2 guards stepped onto the stage. They weren't gentle. They grabbed Preston by the arms. Get off me! Preston yelled, thrashing. Isabel, you can't do this. I'm your husband. Not for long, Isabel said into the mic. As they dragged Preston down the stairs, he passed Hannah, who was still sitting on the floor, mascara running down her face. She reached out for him. Preston, what about the car? What about my apartment lease? Preston didn't even look at her. Get away from me, he spat as the guards hauled him toward the exit. Hannah looked up at the stage. Isabel was looking down at her. And her, Isabel said, pointing at Hannah. She is not an employee. She has no credentials to be here. Escort her out. And Eve, send the forensic accounting team to her apartment tomorrow. If she possesses any assets purchased with company funds, bags, jewelry, electronics, I want them repossessed. If she refuses, call the district attorney and file charges for grand larceny. Hannah's eyes widened in terror. You can't do that. They were gifts. Gifts bought with stolen money are evidence Ms. LaRue, Isabel said. Enjoy the subway ride home. Security guards lifted Hannah up by her elbows and marched her out, her silver dress glittering ironically as she was ejected from the high society she had tried so hard to infiltrate. The doors closed behind the screaming pair. The ballroom was quiet again, but the energy had shifted. It was electric. Isabel stood alone at the podium. She took a deep breath. She didn't look triumphant. She looked relieved. She addressed the crowd. I apologize for the disruption. The bar will reopen in 5 minutes. But before you enjoy the evening, there is one more piece of business. She walked down the stairs and approached a man sitting at table 4. He was a sharp-dressed man, with wire-rimmed glasses. It was Preston's personal lawyer, Simon Glass. Simon, Isabel said pleasantly. Simon looked nervous. He stood up, smoothing his tie. Mrs. Martha. A very dramatic entrance. I have the divorce papers here, Isabel said, snapping her fingers. A waiter appeared, handing her a thick manila envelope. She tossed it onto the table in front of Simon. "I want these served to Preston in the morning." Simon sighed, regaining some of his composure. "Mrs. Martha, while I admire your hostile takeover, you must realize that divorce in New York is complicated. Preston will fight for half. Even if you fired him, he is entitled to equitable distribution of marital assets. That includes your new infusion of cash into the company if it's considered commingled funds. He will drag this out for years. He will want alimony." Isabel smiled. "He can try. But I think you're forgetting the document we signed 6 years ago, the one Preston insisted on." Simon frowned. "The prenuptial agreement?" "Yes, I drafted it. It protects Preston's assets from you. It states that in the event of a divorce, you get nothing. No alimony, no stock, no property. He wanted to ensure you— Excuse me, the waitress didn't marry him for his money." "Exactly," Isabel said. "He was so paranoid that I was a gold digger that he made the terms incredibly strict. Total separation of assets. What is yours, what is mine is mine. No claims on future earnings. No spousal support." Isabel leaned in close to the lawyer. "He thought that piece of paper was a shield to protect his millions from me. But he didn't realize it was actually a sword that would cut his throat." Simon's eyes widened behind his glasses as the logic hit him. "Since I am the one with the money now," Isabel whispered, "and since I am the one who owns the company's debt and the Sinclair fortune, that prenup prevents him from touching a single cent of my money. He insisted on total separation of assets, so he gets to keep his assets, which are currently 0, and I keep mine." "My God," Simon whispered. "He played himself." "He walked right into it," Isabel agreed. "He has no job, no company, no liquidity. And because of the prenup he demanded, he has no legal claim to my wealth. He is leaving this marriage exactly how he thought I entered it. Broke." Isabel turned back to the room. "The open bar is now resumed. Please drink the good champagne. I'm paying for it." The band struck up a lively jazz number. The tension broke. People began to laugh, drink, and chatter excitedly. The king was dead. Long live the queen. Isabel walked toward the side exit, needing a moment of air. But before she could reach the doors, a tall man stepped into her path. He was in his late 30s, wearing a tuxedo that fit him better than Preston's ever had. He had dark hair, eyes that were intelligent and kind, and he was holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. "That was the most terrifying and impressive thing I have ever seen," the man said. Isabel paused. She recognized him. It was Julian. No, wait. It was Ethan Cole, the tech innovator from Silicon Valley who Preston had tried to bully into a merger last year. Preston had called him small fry. Ethan's company was now worth triple what Martha Dynamics had been. "Mr. Cole," Isabel said, accepting the water he offered, "I hope I didn't frighten off a potential partner." "On the contrary," Ethan smiled. "I never liked doing business with Preston. He was all noise and no signal. But you understand leverage, and you understand integrity." "I understand revenge," Isabel corrected him, taking a sip. "It's a specific skill set." "Perhaps," Ethan said. "But now you have a company to run, a company that is currently a mess. You have the capital, Isabel, but do you have the team? You fired the CEO. You're going to need a new strategy." Isabel looked at him. She saw respect in his eyes. Not the lust Preston had, or the condescension. Just respect. "Are you offering to consult Mr. Cole?" "I'm offering to buy you dinner," Ethan said. "Not here." somewhere quiet. We can talk about how to turn Martha Dynamics into Sinclair Tech. I have some ideas on how to clean up the mess Preston left in the Asian markets." Isabel hesitated. She was still married, technically, but the ring on her finger felt like a shackle she had just unlocked. "I'm expensive, Mr. Cole," she joked, a genuine smile finally touching her lips. "I can afford it," Ethan replied. "Car is waiting out back. No paparazzi, just business." "Just business," Isabel agreed. "Let's go." The divorce proceedings of Martha v. Martha were expected to be the society trial of the century. The tabloids predicted a war of the roses, a protracted vicious battle over every painting, every share of stock, and every square foot of Hampton's real estate. They predicted screaming matches and secret tapes. They were wrong. It wasn't a war. It was an autopsy. The courtroom in Lower Manhattan smelled of floor wax and old wood. It was a somber, windowless place that felt miles away from the gilded ballrooms Preston Martha was used to. He sat on the left side of the aisle, fidgeting with the cuffs of a suit that hadn't been pressed in days. His usual entourage of assistants fixers and image consultants was gone. The only person beside him was Simon Glass, his personal attorney, who looked pale and kept checking his watch, as if calculating how many billable hours he was losing by being attached to a client whose credit cards had all been declined that morning. On the right side of the aisle sat Isabel. She was a study in absolute composure. She wore a midnight blue blazer with sharp architectural lines, her hair pulled back in a sleek professional chignon. She wasn't looking at Preston. She was quietly reviewing a stack of documents with a team of 3 lawyers from Vanderbilt and Associates, the kind of firm that didn't just win cases. They destroyed the opposition so thoroughly that they couldn't appeal. "All rise," the bailiff droned. Judge Harrison entered a stern woman with grey hair and a reputation for having zero patience for the tantrums of the wealthy. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked over the rim at Preston. "We are here to finalize the division of assets in the matter of Martha versus Martha," Judge Harrison said. "I have reviewed the motions submitted by both parties. Mr. Glass, your client, is contesting the validity of the prenuptial agreement signed 6 years ago." Simon Glass stood up, clearing his throat nervously. "Yes, Your Honor. We argue that the agreement is unconscionable, given the radical shift in financial power. When Mr. Martha drafted the total separation of assets clause, he was the primary earner. He could not have foreseen that his wife would purchase his company's debt and effectively bankrupt him. To enforce the prenup now would leave him destitute while she retains billions. It is inequitable." Isabel's lead attorney, a man named Marcus Thorne, who looked like a shark in a pinstripe suit, didn't even stand up. He just leaned into his microphone. "Your Honor, Mr. Martha insisted on that specific clause against the advice of Ms. Sinclair's original counsel. He was paranoid that she was marrying him for his money. He demanded that what is mine remains mine, and what is yours remains yours. He wanted a firewall. He cannot complain now, just because he is on the wrong side of the wall he built." Judge Harrison nodded slowly. She looked at Preston. "Miss Martha, did you or did you not threaten to call off the wedding if Miss Sinclair did not sign this specific agreement?" Preston stood up, his hands shaking. "Your Honor, please. I was protecting my company. I built Martha Dynamics. She tricked me. She hid her identity as a Sinclair. That's fraud. She's the one who committed fraud." "Sit down, Mr. Martha," the judge snapped. "Hiding one's maiden name is not fraud. And regarding the prenup, the law does not exist to save you from your own arrogance. You wanted a shield to protect your assets from a wife you deemed lower class. You got your shield. The fact that your assets are now zero and hers are substantial is a result of your business failures, not the contract. The gavel banged, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. The prenuptial agreement stands, Judge Harrison ruled. Mimles, Sinclair Martha, retains 100% of her personal assets, including the Obsidian Group and its holdings, which now include the entirety of Martha Dynamics. Mr. Martha retains his personal effects and any accounts solely in his name. But I have no accounts, Preston shouted, panic rising in his chest. She seized them. The liens took everything. Then you leave with nothing, the judge said coldly. Next case. The walk out of the courthouse was a blur. Preston felt like he was moving underwater. He pushed through the heavy oak doors and stepped out onto the courthouse steps, expecting the usual swarm of paparazzi. He straightened his tie, preparing to give a defiant statement to spin the narrative. But the cameras weren't pointing at him. Isabel had exited a side door moments earlier. The photographers were swarming her, shouting questions about her new vision for the company, her dress, her rumored partnership with Ethan Cole. Preston stood alone at the top of the stairs, watching the woman he had called domestic clutter command the attention of the entire city. He felt a vibration in his pocket. It was his phone. A text from his landlord at the penthouse. Mr. Martha. The locks have been changed per the instructions of the building owner, Obsidian Group. Your personal items have been boxed and left with the concierge. You have 2 hours to collect them before they are donated to charity. Preston stared at the screen. He was homeless. He flagged down a taxi, but as he reached for the door, he remembered he had $12 in his wallet. He let the taxi go and began the long walk uptown to 432 Park Avenue. When he arrived, Miller was waiting in the lobby. The head of security didn't offer a salute. He simply pointed to 3 cardboard boxes sitting on the marble floor near the service elevator. That's it, Preston asked, his voice cracking. I lived here for 10 years. That's my life in 3 boxes. We packed everything that was legally yours. Mr. Martha, Miller said, his face impassive. Clothes, shoes, personal toiletries. The art, the furniture, the electronics. Those were purchased through the corporate account. They stay. Preston fell to his knees, ripping open the top box. He frantically dug through his designer shirts until he found a small velvet jewelry box. He popped it open. It was empty. Where is it? Preston screamed, looking up at Miller. Where is the Patek Philippe? The platinum one. It was a gift from the Saudi prince. Gifts received in the capacity of CEO are considered company property under the bylaws, Miller recited from memory. It's in the company vault. Preston grabbed the box and hurled it across the lobby. I'm going to kill her. I'm going to kill you all. I'd suggest you leave, Mr. Martha, Miller said, stepping closer, his hand hovering near his belt. Before I call the police for trespassing, you're disturbing the residents. Preston grabbed his boxes. He stumbled out onto the street, the wind whipping his hair into his eyes. He dragged his belongings to a pawn shop on 8th Avenue, desperate for cash. He threw his wedding ring, a thick gold band, on the counter. The pawnbroker, a guy with grease under his fingernails, looked at it through a loop. $200. 200. Preston gasped. That's 24-karat gold. It's custom. It's scratched, and it's got an inscription. The guy shrugged. Take it or leave it. Preston took the cash. He used it to check into a motel in Queens that smelled of cigarettes and despair. He sat on the edge of the sagging bed, the neon light from the sign outside buzzing rhythmically. He had one card left to play. Hannah. He had been trying to reach her for days. She had the codes to the offshore accounts in the Caymans, the runaway fund he had set up years ago. There was maybe $2 million in there, not enough to live like a king, but enough to start over. He dialed her number again. "User busy." He turned on the small, static-filled TV in the corner of the room. He flipped through the channels looking for distraction. He landed on a local news station. The headline banner read, "Breaking Martha Embezzlement Scandal Widens." The camera cut to a press conference on the steps of the district attorney's office. And there she was, Hannah LaRue. She wasn't wearing the flashy, revealing clothes she used to wear when she was on Preston's arm. She was dressed demurely in black, wearing large sunglasses, looking like a grieving widow. She stood next to a federal prosecutor. "Ms. LaRue has been fully cooperative with our investigation," the prosecutor announced. "In exchange for immunity regarding her role in the misappropriation of funds, she has provided the state with the access keys to several offshore shell companies established by Preston Martha." Preston felt the blood drain from his face. He scrambled off the bed, pressing his face close to the dirty screen. "No," he whispered. "No, Hannah, don't." A reporter shoved a microphone in Hannah's face. "Ms. LaRue, do you have anything to say to Mr. Martha?" Hannah lowered her sunglasses. She looked directly into the camera. There was no remorse in her eyes. There was only the cold, hard instinct of survival. "Preston who?" she said. Then she turned, flipped her hair, and walked into the black SUV waiting for her. She hadn't just left him. She had buried him. She had traded his freedom for hers. The offshore money was gone. The feds would freeze it within the hour. If he tried to access it now, he'd be arrested. Preston sank back onto the floor of the motel room. He pulled his knees to his chest. For the first time in 40 years, Preston Martha cried. Not soft, dignified tears, ugly, heaving sobs that shook his entire body. He realized with terrifying clarity that he was the villain of his own life story, and the movie was over. 1 year later, the alarm clock buzzed at 4:30 a.m. It was a harsh, metallic sound that grated against Preston's nerves. He rolled out of the cot in the basement apartment he rented in Jersey City. It was a windowless box near the boiler room. The heat was suffocating in the winter and non-existent in the summer. He groaned as he stood up. His back ached. His hands, once manicured and soft, were now calloused and stained with grease. He walked to the small sink and splashed cold water on his face. The man looking back in the mirror was almost unrecognizable. He had lost 20 pounds. His hair was grey and thinning. The arrogant circle in his eyes had been replaced by a dull, flat resignation. He put on his uniform, a grey jumpsuit with the logo City Logistics stitched on the pocket. Preston Martha. The man who used to fly private to Milan for lunch was now a level 1 forklift operator. He spent 12 hours a day moving pallets of toilet paper and dog food. He made $18.50 an hour. He grabbed a stale bagel and walked to the subway. It was raining a cold November sleet that bit into his skin. Today was the anniversary. 1 year since the gala. 1 year since the doors opened and Isabel walked in wearing that red dress. He shouldn't go. He knew he shouldn't go. But his feet moved on their own. Instead of taking the train to the warehouse in Queens, he transferred to the line heading into Manhattan. He got off at Fifth Avenue and walked toward the building that used to be his kingdom. The rain was coming down harder now. He stood across the street, huddled under the awning of a coffee shop. He looked up. The massive sign that had once screamed Martha in gold was gone. In its place cool blue LED lights spelled out Sinclair Tech. The building looked cleaner, brighter. There were solar panels on the lower roofs. The landscaping was lush. It looked like a company with a future, not a monument to one man's ego. The revolving doors spun. Preston held his breath. Isabel walked out. She was breathtaking. But it wasn't the clothes, though the cream-colored cashmere trench coat was clearly worth more than Preston's annual salary. It was her energy. She was laughing at something the doorman said. She looked light, burden-free. She stopped on the sidewalk, opening a sleek black umbrella. She checked her phone, smiling at a message. Then a car pulled up. Not a limousine with a chauffeur, but a sporty Tesla. The driver's side door opened, and Ethan Cole stepped out. He was wearing jeans and a blazer. He walked around the car, not rushing, just happy to see her. He kissed her. It wasn't a showy Hollywood kiss for the cameras. It was a soft, intimate peck on the lips, the kind of kiss shared by two people who actually liked each other. Preston felt a physical pain in his chest, sharp and agonizing. He took a step forward out from the awning and into the rain. Isabel! The name tore out of his throat before he could stop it. It was a desperate, ragged sound. Isabel froze. She turned toward the sound. Ethan turned too, his hand instinctively going to the small of her back. Isabel scanned the street. Her eyes swept over the traffic, the tourists, and finally landed on the grey, shivering figure standing by the bus stop. Preston took a step closer. He raised his hands, palms up. He didn't know what he wanted. Forgiveness, money. Acknowledgement. He just wanted her to see him, to validate that he still existed. "It's me," he mouthed. "It's Preston." Isabel stared at him. For 5 agonizing seconds their eyes locked. Preston waited for the anger. He waited for her to yell, to point, to laugh. He would have taken the anger. Anger meant passion. Anger meant he still mattered to her. But there was no anger. Isabel's face didn't change. She didn't frown. She didn't squint. She looked at him with the same polite, blank expression one uses when looking at a pigeon on the sidewalk or a discarded newspaper. Absolute, crushing indifference. She turned to Ethan. She said something that made him chuckle. Then she got into the car. She didn't look back. Not once. The Tesla hummed and pulled away, disappearing into the sea of yellow taxis. Preston stood there, the rain soaking through his jumpsuit, chilling him to the bone. Miller, the security guard who used to hold the door for him, was standing at the entrance. Miller saw Preston. He paused for a moment, his hand on the door handle. Preston looked at Miller, a silent plea for recognition in his eyes. "You know me. I was the boss." Miller just shook his head, a look of mild pity crossing his face. He turned his back and walked inside the warm, golden lobby of Sinclair Tech. Preston was alone on the street. He looked down at his cheap digital watch. 7:45 a.m. He was going to be late for his shift. "Hey, buddy," a passing businessman shouted, bumping into Preston's shoulder. "Watch where you're going. You're blocking the sidewalk." "Sorry," Preston whispered, stepping into the gutter. "I'm sorry." He turned and began the long walk back to the subway. He realized then that Isabel had done something far worse than destroying him. She had forgotten him. Wow. The silence from Isabel at the end hit harder than any scream could have. It's a powerful reminder that the best revenge isn't always making a scene. Sometimes it's just becoming so successful and happy that the people who hurt you no longer exist in your world. Preston lost everything, not because he was bad at business, but because he didn't value loyalty. He chased the shiny, superficial things and threw away the diamond he had at home. I'd love to know what you think. Do you think Preston deserved to end up totally broke, or was the punishment too harsh? And what would you have done if you were in Isabel's shoes? Would you have saved the company, or just let him fail on his own? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new drama every week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.